rights of the people. And by the way, if you come to the very the classical understanding of, for example, the 6 main principles of Sharia, for example, when it comes to protecting life, protecting the human beings, protecting religion, protecting the goods of the people, or anything which has to do with the family, or dignity of the people, you have protecting, and at the same time, it's a duty for you to go for this protection. So you are protecting the rights, and you have a duty towards this protection. So it's duties and rights at the same time. So there is something which is a moral obligation to promote. So diversity or respecting multiculturalism. So we have really something which is a stereotype in the West, in Europe, is to compare France with Britain. So it's the two, opposite models. And I think that is completely useless. Why? Because you will find in every model assets and liabilities. Of course, you have things that are working, and so I would prefer not to compare a country with another country, even though sometimes we can we can compare experiences. But I would prefer to compare the ideals of a country with its own practices. So tell me what you stand for and in which way you are implementing your values. And I would prefer, for example, to listen to what the Canadians are saying about their, ideals, their values, and to look at the practices. Is this exactly what you are doing? And here you can compare the reality of our consistency. Because it's very easy, once again, in France, when I was in Britain just after July the 7th, the French were telling me, you see, the British model is failing. It's a failure. Why? Because they got the terrorist attacks. But this was in 2005, in July. In December 2005, the British was laughing. The French model is failing. Why? Because they got the riots in the suburbs. So you compare the models, and in fact, it's useless. You are not going nowhere. It's not because the British is better, the British model is better, or the French model is better, or even the Canadian model is better, and Canadians are very happy with the multicultural society. I would say you are much better than many European societies. But you can be much better if you are more consistent with your own values, because there are many things that could be improved in the Canadian society. When you live in the country, you know what I'm talking about, that there are things that are to be improved to be more consistent with the values that we are promoting. So these are two main mistakes that we have to avoid when it comes to this discussion. So let us now come to the second level of our discussion. The first is the theoretical approach towards human rights, to be able to say clearly where we stand, and in which way we are dealing and accepting the substance of the human rights and the universality of some of these rights, and then, of these rights, not some of these rights, the universality of the rights, and then to be clear on what we are trying to promote, and then to come with a clear methodology in the way we try to compare what is said by the country and what are the practices within this country. And then, we understand, contrary to what is said, it's not after September the 11th that we started to have problems, for example, in the West, in the way we had this polarization. In fact, if you follow what happened in Europe, for example, but also in the States even before what was happening in Europe, the reality was not that, after September 11, we had this polarization and the fact that Islam became a problem. But in our societies, in the States, for example, if you go through all the literature and what was the reality of the African Americans in the society, it's quite clear that there were problems of justice, equal treatment, and discriminations. Racism was a reality. In Europe, it was a reality, and we started to have the problem of the Muslim visibility, for example, in France in 1989, when the first headscarf affair started. So it's much before September the 11th. It's as if, everything was coming. No, that's not true. The problem of this new visibility, this visibility of people who were understood yesterday as being not among us, not from us, coming from as foreigners, not defining our common identity. It was something which was already, when I was coming in the 90s in the States, and I was talking to some of the African Americans, they were saying, it's as if we are not part of this society. We are too black to be Americans, or to be perceived as equal Americans. They were talking about civil rights. All this is even, of course, a very old discussion in our societies. So I think that it's really important here not to be over-emphasizing the impact of September 11th, even though it was instrumentalized and it has consequences in our discussion. So, what happened with this new visibility in the Western societies, for example, with the Muslims, was a kind of more and more visible presence and more polarized discourse, the us versus them, these people coming from being the others. And this is also what you can find in many Muslim majority societies, the perception of them, the West, as being the others. So we had a global polarization in the discourse, more and more, and in our societies the reality of this us versus them. And September the 11th emphasized and increased this perception that people were not coming from the same background and that we have an us versus them. So this is something which is important, and the war on terror, and then everything which was to do with politics of fears, polarization, was nurturing this. Why I'm saying this? Because this has an impact in anything which has to do with the way we deal with human rights and the way we deal with the political discourse. And I will come to this. What we had coming from many governments in the West, the United States of America with the Bush administration, was really the driving force of this discourse is the discourse of polarization and politics of fears, mistrust and fears. Even though it was said it's not against Islam, this obsession about them, and starting by saying, if this happens in our society, it's because they don't like our values. So look at this, it's quite important. They don't like our democracy. In fact, they don't like our human rights. They don't want what we have achieved. So this perception that there is a problem not only in the way they are asking for more justice, the wrong way to do it, and of course we condemn this, the terrorist attacks, but the problem was the discourse, the narrative, the rationale behind the discourse was really about this us versus them, based on we don't share the same values. So when you have a discourse saying we don't share the same values, means you have to prove that you share our values. So it's not on an equal footing. Prove us that you share our values. So there is a universal set of values. This is our values, these are our values. So prove us that you are sharing them. So in the discourse during the last 7 years, it's as if on the defensive there is a discourse that we have to prove that these values are shared values, in fact. And this, so we have politics of fears, polarization, and a very important discussion around the whole discourse. What was also important, and I will come to this because here we have states that were playing with that and instrumentalizing this, is something which has to do with populism. And I was always saying, and this is also coming from the neocon, but you had it also in Canada, but we had it throughout the Western countries. And if you listen to what also were the discourses coming from some Muslim majority countries, it's something which has to do with less politics and more emotions. This is the very meaning of populism, attracting the emotions, the fears of the people, and nurturing a discourse which is simplistic but portraying the others and portraying yourself as around some common values. So we had this coming everywhere during the last 6-7 years, and I think that this is quite important to